It is Vikings receiver Adam Thielen, a bright spot in what's been a frustrating start to the season for Minnesota. Thielen said he models his game after another native Minnesotan, all-time great receiver, Larry Fitzgerald.
He's a guy that I grew up following. He's a guy that, I've been around in the off seasons training with him and things like that. And I just know how hard he works and how successful he's been. And I've really tried to emulate what I've done from him.
See, there's almost no one out there that has more respect for his approach and the way he plays and the work and dedication he puts into the game than you do towards Larry Fitzgerald. Is that a good guy to want to emulate for the most part if you're Adam Thielen?
Absolutely. And Larry has been one of the most giving. I'm talking about his life is open. Adam talks about he has a house about a mile from the Vikings facility. So when Larry gets treated in the offseason, he uses the University of Minnesota, their training facilities, and the Vikings training facility. And he invites, all kinds of players. Through the years, he's had hundreds of quarterbacks, wide receivers, different positions, coaches, NFL former players, Hall of Famers. Like, he brings all these people there so that he can learn. And Adam has been there. So he's invited Adam. Adam has been able to see it. Larry is a great role model, especially if you've grown up in the state. I mean, how many guys can you look to say, hey, I want to grow up like this guy? Larry Fitzgerald, born and raised in Minneapolis.
That's what I was just going to say.
Born and raised in Minneapolis, probably the most famous football player ever in the state's history. Yeah, he's a great person. And off the field, I know this through people who work with the Vikings. I know this because my daughter works there for their foundation. Adam Thielen's just like Larry Fitzgerald. Very, very giving, very organization conscious, very, very community driven, family guy. So, yeah, he's doing all the right things. Sometimes you hear these stories and we know being behind the scenes, being like, that's all not true. But Adam Thielen, it is a fairy tale. Great kid. No one wanted him in the NFL. No one thought he could ever play in the NFL. Scholarship offer, he had $500
to Mankato State.
Yeah, that's not even an offer. That's just basically to do the paperwork. The money that it costs to do your paperwork to get you registered, we're going to front that to you. So tremendous story there with the Vikings, with the state of Minnesota, and Larry Fitzgerald's one of the best stories that the state's ever had.
And I'm glad you emphasized that Larry's from there. Larry's dad is one of the most famous journalists for black newspapers in America and has been in Minneapolis forever. That's how you knew him since he was very young. Like, so people hear Larry, they're like, Pitt and then Arizona, but the connection is he grew up in Minneapolis. And so we've heard Adam Thielen on this show talking about when he was a little kid looking up to you, but Larry Fitzgerald is more of someone he can touch and feel, like someone he's played against, someone he can measure himself against.
And that's someone that Larry has pulled him in to his little group and spent personal time with him. And
Adam Thielen's story is, you talked about it, but just making the NFL for Adam Thielen makes it a 1 in a 10 million story. But him becoming an all-pro caliber player, last year having 1,300 yards, this year being on pace for 1,900 receiving yards, breaking the all-time NFL record for 100-yard games to start a season.
Crazy.
And it's a story for young athletes or young people almost anywhere to say, hey, man, don't put a ceiling on what your dreams were. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure he wanted to play D1 football. That door was closed. He still didn't close his NFL dream. I want to be drafted. That door is closed. Still didn't close his NFL dream. And now he's legitimately in the discussion as one of the best wide receivers in football. And it's not even a discussion. He is one of the most productive wide receivers in football.
For people that don't get a chance to always watch the Vikings play, who does his game remind you of? Is it Larry Fitzgerald? Is there someone else that he models his receiving game after?
It's hard to say Larry, but I can take things from Larry's game. He's a great route runner. He's a student of the game. He is very good at contested, but Larry is such a better athlete. Larry plays in the air as good as any wide receiver that's ever played. Also, Larry has them playoff games that, Larry goes off. You get Larry Fitzgerald in the playoff game, and he has shown the reason why he's been one of the greats. So the route running, the contested, the being a student of the game, all those things, loving football. Him and Stephon Diggs have a tremendous relationship, too. So not being a selfish, diva, high-maintenance wide receiver, those are all things that he grabbed from Larry Fitzgerald.
Thielen is, you said it, one of the best in the league at contested catches. Fitzgerald has arguably the best hands ever. It's on the very short list. Like, and so that is something almost nobody in the league, not Odell, not AB, like, can compare as far as their ability to be sure-handed at all times. You could put Larry against any player in the history of the league, but Larry's story makes sense. Like, Larry was a blue-chip prospect. Larry was
the best wide receiver in his high school class.
Was dominant at Pitt. I was in college when Larry was going to Syracuse, and I watched him beat Syracuse over the head every year when he was at Pitt. Was a first-round pick, a high first-round pick.
He followed the script. Thielen didn't.
Thielen followed almost a script unlike any guy that's reached this level at that position. Like, Antonio Brown's unexpected because he wasn't a first-round pick, but he was still blue-chip throughout. Like, Thielen's thing's unbelievable.
The one thing Thielen will always have over Larry, and Larry's done great things in Arizona. The Bidwell family's been great to him. He's great in that community. But Thielen is the star for Larry's team. No matter what Larry accomplishes, man, that experience he had as a kid growing up, being a ball boy, the Minnesota Vikings is his team. And the star for that team is another Minnesota guy. So regardless of what Larry, what he accomplishes, Thielen will always have that one up on him.
Fun story. It's a great story. Thanks. Coming up, how concerned should the Pats be with the 5-0 Kansas City Chiefs? We will break that down next on First Things First.
No, don't be concerned.
You know what Larry's always going to have one up on Thielen?